UFC 306 happens in just 1 week's time, and it will be taking place at the Las Vegas Sphere, which Dana White had said that it will be the greatest event in the history of combat sports. And unfortunately for us fight fans, that is an utter load of bollocks, because that will not be the case. If you look at this fight card, you will quickly understand that this isn't going to be the greatest combat sports event of all time, or whatever the actual quote is. It's not going to be that in the slightest. So when you have a look at this fight card, when you look at it, does it make you think, this fight card really has potential to be one of the greatest sporting events of all time? I don't think that it does. This fight card consists of 10 fights, and I wouldn't really have a problem with that. Usually fight cards consist of about, what, 12, 13 fights usually. If it's going to consist of 10, whatever, but make sure that it's quality all around, and I don't believe we get that when it comes to all of these 10 fights. I'm not saying there's no quality on this card, that would be a stupid thing to say, but for the most part it feels like it's just filler. It's just full of Mexican fighters, and again, there's nothing wrong with that. And you wanna celebrate Mexican Independence Day, that is completely fine. But why has it got to take place at the Sphere, at this place where it's going to be a one-time thing? Why would you do it themed around Mexican Independence Day? It doesn't really make sense to me. Why wouldn't you do a Mexican Independence Day in Mexico? Would that not make more sense? I don't really understand the logic behind this card being Mexican themed when it's not in Mexico and being at the Sphere. It just feels like a complete and utter waste, especially when you compare it to a card like UFC 308, just a random Abu Dhabi card, which is an absolute banger and much better than UFC 306. When you have a look at UFC 308, you're thinking this is a really solid card. Maybe you wouldn't go on to say the greatest sporting event of all time, but I feel like this card would be a lot more fitting to that title compared to UFC 306. On the early prelims, you have the debut of Ilia Toporia's older brother, so straight away that's an interesting fight. People want to see how his brother gets on in the UFC on his debut. I believe he has a record of 5-1, 28 years old. I think his name is Alexander Topuria. Quite interesting from the get-go. And then you have Oralbai versus Rebecki, or however you say the names. I'm quite bad with pronunciations. Very solid fight. After this, you have Abis Magomedov taking on Ferreira. Solid middleweight fight. You move on to the prelims. You have Sharabullet making another appearance. You have they're killing me with the pronunciations of these names. You have Farek Tadinov taking on Ruzabiov. Solid welterweight banger. You got Delima taking on Nzechekwu. I can't say these names, but his heavyweight debut, he used to be a light heavyweight. Decent little heavyweight fight, not the best. You have Jeff Neal taking on RDA. Okay, doesn't really make sense, but two household names. Decent little matchup, you know, probably going to be quite a competitive fight. Then you go on to the main card. You got Lerone Murphy taking on Dan Ige. That should be quite an exciting fight. You move on, you have Magomed Ankalaev taking on Rakic. Whoever wins that could be the next person in shot for a title shot. Nothing wrong with that. Then you have a rematch between Cyril Gane and Volkov. Whoever wins that could be in contention for a title shot in the heavyweight division. You then have the co-main, which is Robert Whittaker and Khamzat Chimaev. Very interesting matchup. Can Robert Whittaker break the winning streak of Chimaev and become the first person to defeat him? We don't know. There's a bit of a iffy on that one, because, you know, will Khamzat Chimaev be able to get past a common cold and make it to fight night? We don't know, but still a very great co-main, especially if it's 5 rounds. And then you have a banger of a main event, which is Ilia Topuria and Max Holloway. In my opinion, going to be fight of the year contender. Very interesting matchup. We don't know how that fight is going to go. Very 50-50. That is what you call an absolutely stacked card. And now the UFC is struggling to sell tickets to this event after investing over $20 million into the event. So right now we are on the Ticketmaster website for UFC 306, and as you can see, all of these blue mark sections are available sections, but if we zoom in a bit more, we can see that the legend at the bottom right says available blue, verified resale is pink, and there is a lot of seats right now what's either available or verified resale, and you wonder why that is. I feel like, again, because of the quality of the card itself, but not only that, but I feel like if we look at some tickets here, these are the lowest price, $720. $720 is the cheapest ticket right now for the UFC Sphere event. And why would anyone pay that when the quality of the card is just not really that good? If we look at the best seats, well, they go up to almost 10 grand, which is absolutely crazy. But for the common person who may want to go to a UFC event for the first time and go to the Sphere, the greatest sporting event of all time, it's going to cost you $700 for a ticket alone, never mind the travel, the accommodation, never mind all of that. And you're not guaranteed, an entertaining card, because on paper, it's not looking likely. And about a month ago, I made a video talking about UFC 306 and that it should be massive, and some fights that maybe they should add on to the card, because at the time we had a few fights announced for that card, and they were looking just so and so. Anthony Hernandez and Michelle Pereira was also on the card at the time, but then it got moved to a main event of a fight night card, which I understand that's worthy of being a main event for a fight night card. I think that's a solid main event. Still would like to have seen it on this card, but whatever, I suppose. But these are the fights that I suggested what could have been on the card, and I do think would have made a massive improvement. I suggested Diego Lopez, Brian Ortega. We're getting that on the card, so fair enough. I even said maybe Diego Lopez against Yair Rodriguez. But regardless, we get Diego Lopez, we get Brian Ortega. Very solid fight. I also said maybe Sean Strickland versus Robert Whittaker, #1 contender fight for the middleweight title. And while Strickland just wants to sit out for the rest of the year, and now we get Robert Whittaker versus Khamzat Chimaev at UFC 308. So, maybe that would have been nice at UFC 306, but I don't know if Khamzat's able to leave to fight in America. So that is what it is. Then we had, I suggested Cejudo against Aldo. I feel like that would have added a fair bit. I know Cejudo classes himself as American now, but he's also is it Mexican American? I don't know how he plays there, but that would have been a decent fight. Cejudo's now said that he wants to fight at flyweight, and Aldo's now going to match up for UFC 307, I believe, against Mario Batista. So that's another one gone, which I feel like you could have had on 306. Then you had a suggestion of Aljamain Sterling against Movsar, a fight what's on UFC 307. I feel like you could have had that on 306. Yeah, it might not have been the most entertaining fight, but name value would have been decent for this card. And then I also suggested maybe Jack Della Maddalena versus Shavkat, as both of them haven't fought for a while. I think Shavkat hasn't fought all of 2024. And JDM was earlier on in the year against Gilbert Burns. That would have given both plenty of time to fight at the Sphere, and that would have been a very, very entertaining fight. And we haven't got that fight. I feel like we can make that fight. That should have been made for the Sphere, and we didn't get that. Those were just a few fights I suggested to make the UFC 306 much better, and we didn't get either of those apart from Diego Lopez and Ortega. And overall, we've just been lied to by Dana White. Got our hopes up that this was going to be a certified banger, and it's showing that that isn't going to be the case. We've been lied to, our hopes are up, and now they've been crushed, and we aren't going to get some unreal card, unfortunately. And it's a massive shame. I feel like if we just avoided doing this on Mexican Independence Day, they could have had a lot more room to work with. I understand if you're going to do a Mexican Independence Day card, do it in Mexico. You're going to have a load of Mexican fighters. That's completely understandable. But don't use that on a one-time occasion at the Sphere, make it this, big blockbuster event, and you've had to, wiggle your way around it to include all these Mexican fighters. It just ruined the quality of the card, unfortunately. And you just know when this doesn't turn out to be the greatest sporting event of all time, or greatest combat sporting event of all time, Dana White will find a way to spin it and be like, well, we were the first guys to ever do a combat sports show in the USV, the Las Vegas Sphere. He'll run it into that and, call it groundbreaking history or some bollocks like that. He'll find a way to spin it in order to, fit this narrative that, the UFC was a success when it came to going to the Sphere, when really it probably wasn't. But let me know what you guys think about the UFC 306 card. Are you excited for it? Can you not wait to see what takes place at the UFC Las Vegas Sphere? Let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.